Hello, welcome to the Soulrocker podcast, and I'm your host, Vanessa Delgado. So today's episode is one that I've been wanting to talk about, but I've been a little bit resistant towards speaking on it for some reason. And I actually, as a matter of fact, I just got home from the gym. I would say that I feel like it's kind of that energy where I had so I'm a certified personal trainer. And I attempted twice to be a online coach. And as a matter of fact, the second time that I attempted to, I really invested and really went full force to hiring a coach course situation where they basically walked me through the logistics and all the backside of how to run a business. And it was a really, really cool experience. It was a little bit expensive as well. And it's just the attempt to be this coach that I had, thought about was not what I had imagined. And it really disappointed me. There's a lot of other reasons why, the whole fitness thing, I love it. I absolutely love it. But it does it does have a negative feel to it, I guess you can say, just because, I guess I'll say this. Essentially, I wanted to work with a very specific kind of people, and it was really hard to attract those people when I was working on my, creating my own business. And there's a lot of planning and a lot of background of a process in order for you to really eventually kind of grow and build this community and attract the people. And there's a lot of marketing aspect to it that I feel applies to having a business like that. And I feel like it wasn't really my thing, and I was really discouraged for it because the people that I did kind of work with for a short period of time they essentially were looking for kind of a quick fix pill, so to speak, and they wanted these unrealistic results and unrealistic programs, and I was like, no, this is not how it works. And I think part of it is I really love hard work, and I wanted to attract people that were wanting to put in the hard work and take the time to learn all these things or all this information. And I was going to provide so much information that I wish that I had access to when I first started. And so essentially I just didn't have somewhat of the patience that it took and the drive I just didn't have essentially what it needed to take to be a coach and to motivate people in that way because of just the kind of person that I am. And instead I was like, you know what? I think I realized that I really just enjoy. And so I just essentially learned that I really enjoy fitness and for myself and not necessarily to make it out of a business. So in the end, I don't regret any of the attempts. I don't regret getting certified and essentially not even using that as a way to, make money, whatever, because I've learned a lot, and not just within, about fitness for myself, but I learned a lot about career-wise, what I need, what I want, and what I don't want out of, a career. So basically, so my fitness journey has been super insane. I started my fitness journey when I was 25 and I'm now 34. And I would have literally never thought, if you had told me, so this is going on, I'm about 9 years now, have been consistent with it. And it literally shocks me all the time. If you would have told me 10 years ago that this would have been my lifestyle and everything that I do now and what I've done within everything, I would have been like, what? No, you have the wrong person. Absolutely. I even still get my dad constantly makes comments, and he doesn't understand how how I go about my diet and how I go about things, because to me, I take things really, really serious. He's just he doesn't get it. And at one point I was going to recently I was actually going to compete, and I was kind of pre-prepping. And when I say compete, I was, I'll get into that a little bit, but basically I was going to compete in bodybuilding, in the bikini division. I was trying to explain to him like, okay, well, what is it about? And he just did not understand why. Like, he sees me already kind of lean, and he's like, how is it that you're going to still lose like 10, 15 more pounds? Like, you're going to be left with nothing. And he just didn't get like the purpose of it. And it was really hard to try to translate and explain things. He was just like, where did this come from? Like, nobody in the family, even like on my mom's side of the family, like no one on either side of my family has ever been into fitness like that, has never really dieted. Like, it's weird. Like, where did you get that from? So again, like, I didn't grow up with any kind of influence in healthy nutrition or like sports even, or fitness at all. In fact, like, my grandmother was diabetic, and I say was because she's passed now, but I remember just seeing her always constantly struggling with her weight and her health. And much of my family, especially on my mom's side of the family, is on, the heavier side. And, there's a lot of like high blood pressure, there's diabetes that runs in the family, things like that. So I, on the other hand, I think I took after my dad's genes, because I have always been the type of kid that like I would always eat. Like, my mom fed me, she got me into a routine of eating breakfast every day, and she always made sure that I packed my lunch and had plenty of snacks, and I would come home and have another snack, and then I would have dinner. And then I would go again, like have a bedtime snack, like right before bed. And oftentimes, like, I loved Oreos. I would have like at least like 6 Oreos and milk, And so I was always always well fed, and I was always like small. I mean, now that I think about it, like, especially when I was like middle high school, I was like skinny fat, what you call it, it's called the quote unquote skinny fat. But I just never really struggled or even necessarily thought about my weight, but I did get somewhat, like, I don't know if I want to say bullied, but I got a lot of comments like within my family, and they were like, they would say things to me like, oh, maybe you should eat, or like, I would have like certain family members like say things like, well, boys don't like skinny girls, and then I would have friends who would kind of make comments like, oh yeah, the skinny one and this and that. And, like for a while, like, it didn't bother me, but eventually when you start hearing it all the time, like, it began to bother me. It was something that was in the back of my mind all the time. And I didn't like how I felt like I had like kind of like a little girl's body, especially when I got into high school, and, you're starting to slowly go into like a mature role, and you're like, okay, you're really, into boys and this and that. And so I remember questioning that about myself too. I was only active so I think part of it was just having like a good metabolism, good genetics, but also, like, of course you had the gym that kept me busy, in school, like walking, but you're still kind of like walking around and doing stuff. And then I also, when I was about 15, I started going out, like every other weekend to like dancing. So I used to dance a lot when I was a teen. And so that was a way that I got in like a lot of my, quote unquote, like exercise and movement. Well, I started to gain weight by when I was like 20, 21. And, I just put on like a couple pounds, and just like each year I just kind of kept adding more and more. And my diet had changed a lot. I was going through a lot of financial struggles, and, it was easy to eat a lot of takeout. And also because of my routine changing so much after high school, it's like, I went through school, like grade school, middle school, and high school. And I was essentially like on a routine for all those years. And all of a sudden I, finished school, and things changed a lot. So did my routine. And so I began to eat like less meals. And then that kind of like translated for me to eat a lot bigger meals. And I don't think that that's something that sits well with me, especially because I've noticed that in the last since I've started my fitness journey, having to play around with food and meal timing, I noticed that this brought me back to that time where I was overeating because I was eating 3 times a day, when that's not something that I was used to eating. Even though we live here in America or other parts of the world, everyone is so accustomed to having 2 to 3 meals a day. And I was actually one of the few that I was used to eating 4 to 5 times a day. And that's what my body and just my customs got used to. And so I started putting on quite a bit of weight. So by the time I got to 25, I was probably 30 pounds overweight, maybe close to 40 actually. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but on a person that's short, on the shorter side, I'm 5'3", and I've never, been that kind of weight. And when it's pure fat, it doesn't feel or actually look the same as if it were to be somebody who's taller or somebody who's putting on some, building some muscle on top. So it's not pure fat. So essentially I started to feel just terrible, with my self-esteem, with the way that I just felt health-wise. When I was about 24, almost 25, I had joined the gym because I was okay, this is, I need to do something. But it was, just kind of one of those things, most people are yeah, I need to do something. So I joined the gym. I went to Anytime Fitness. And shortly after I joined, I was okay, I don't know what I'm doing. Let me try and hiring one of their coaches. So I hired one of the coaches, and I did a 6-month plan, and I was going once a week. I learned a little bit about training, and I had a little bit of motivation, but that was literally the only time that I would go to the gym, was that 1 time a week appointment that I had with my coach, with a trainer, because I was so embarrassed to go and, be seen and not knowing what I'm doing and how I looked. I was so concerned about all those things, so I wouldn't go. Basically, during the 6 months that I was in the gym, I didn't see any kind of progress, which I don't, obviously it's because I wasn't eating, differently. I just was eating the same exact way. And that was the only time that I was going to the gym was that one time. So a half hour once a week, eating the same thing, it's not gonna make a dent in your body or your health, really. After the coach, I basically could try to continue, with what I was doing and what I had learned, and just kind of going. And after a short period of time, I just got to a point where I was okay, I just still feel so shitty about myself, about my health. And I began to get kind of scared, because it was okay, I really need to think about this, because these illnesses run in my family. I do not want to get to that point. I don't want to be that person that gets to the point where they're already in the red zone, and it's oh shit, I'm literally I'm a cheeseburger away from getting diabetes or whatever. It's I was I don't want to get to that point. So it was just something that was sitting on my mind for a while. And finally, well, not finally, it was one day I just woke up, and it sounds cliche, but literally I woke up one day and I was so motivated to be okay, this is it. I'm gonna change. I'm make this a commitment, and I need to start. The thing is that I didn't know anything. I was completely clueless about nutrition. I hear people all the time at work over the years, and some people actually have way more knowledge than I did when I first started. I was holy shit, I didn't even know that fruit was carbs, and what was protein, nothing. I literally knew nothing. And the only thing that I knew as far as fitness was and workouts was what I was taught with my coach, my trainer. I had never dieted in my life. So I was the only thing that I knew was based off of what I saw people in my surroundings, my everyday life. And maybe I heard or saw a magazine here and there, but it was nothing that I ever really paid attention to on TV or magazines, because it wasn't something that I was interested in or needed to do. I was okay, well, what is it that I normally see people do? So normally people are okay, I'm going to start on Monday, and they completely try to change their diet 360. It's completely opposite. They cut everything out. They eat nothing but lettuce and I don't know what else. And I was like, that, what kind of results that leads people to normally, like, yeah, they lose the weight and very quickly. But like after, everyone's threshold is different. Like I've noticed that some people, like, they'll push it out to like 3 months, but usually it's like the 3 months is a max that people will actually like stay on this diet. And then all of a sudden it's like all their hard work goes to shit and they're back to square one. And I was like, I am not going to put this kind of effort just so I can be back to square one. So I need to do something differently than what everyone else does, because if that's what the results come to, then like that's not what I'm going to do. And I was like, okay, so I know I need to start doing research, but I'm not going to let like that to be an excuse for me not to start something somewhere. So I was like, my personal common sense was like, okay, I know I need to make habits. Like that's something that just seems like sense to me, that like I'm gonna have to build habits if I want to actually change and keep the change, not just take shortcuts and do those types of things. So I was like, okay, well, let me just start with cutting like soda, and not even like full blown like cold turkey. I'm talking like, if I at the time I can't remember how much I was drinking, but like let's just say you drink 2 to 3 cans or bottles a day, like go back down to like 1, cut back down to 1 and try to maintain that, and seeing like, can you taper off more from there, and saying like, okay, now I taper to 1 a day. Now maybe in a week or 2, I can taper back to, having maybe 3 a week and not having 1 to 2 days out of the week. You know what I'm saying? Like stuff like that. And so I began to do something like that, just something light. And I was like, okay, let me just continue to eat the normal food that I'm eating, but let me just maybe go with a little bit smaller portions, not like go full blown, like barely even having, anything on my plate. Like just continue to eat all what I normally eat, but just cutting back the portion just like to half or something. And I just started that way, and I started going to the gym and doing the things that I had already learned. And you kind of like look at other people, and from then on I just started to do research almost on a daily basis. And it's like things that I learned I would apply, and I would give it a little bit of time before I would switch it to something else. But I also learned I wasn't going to do something, and this is like, I didn't even know, which I'm really, really glad that I did that, was just because we read about certain like diets and things like that, and because they technically do work, doesn't mean that it's something that I should try. Like when I heard about keto, and this was not even like, keto wasn't around until like way later, but it was something that I was like, if it had been available or known at least, because keto's been around, but it just wasn't as mainstream as it is now. But like, let's just say keto, it would have been something that I would have not even considered to try, just because of, even with all the rant and the rave of the success rate, just because to me, it's like, I like my carbs, and restricting myself to something that I can't sustain full, like long term, just doesn't make any sense to me. It didn't make any sense. So like when I had heard about intermediate fasting, I was like, no, I'm not going to try that, because I'm the type of person that I like to eat breakfast pretty much right away when I wake up. Like I'm that person, and I'm that person that needs to eat a heavy breakfast. Like I'm not talking like super, I'm talking like oatmeal. I love something that's like very nutritious and satiated. So I like having some fat. I like having some protein, some carbs in there, and just having like a full like meal. And that's what really, helps me like wake up, and that's what gives me energy for the day and get started. And I'm usually waking up really hungry. So it's like, I'm not going to do something that just because of, like there's no perfect way to dieting, and I'm not going to force something just because, like I said, because of the success numbers that you hear everyone else doing, or just because, Patty, some girl named Patty or whatever that I know that like mentioned that like, oh yeah, this is good. Like just because she's doing it doesn't mean I have to go and do the same thing, So shortly after I started kind of like really getting into it, on my own and really applying and starting changing these habits, I ended up switching to going to Planet Fitness. When I started for a little while, like it was a little bit hard to go to the gym because, it's like you come home from work and, like by that time, like you're just like wanting to chill and who's motivated to really go to the gym after work, half the time. There was other times too where it's like I had other things to do, other errands to run, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, no, wait a minute. Like this can't be a reason. These reasons can't be an excuse to have me miss out on the gym. Like I need to, at that point I had already kind of learned a little bit and read and research that like, okay, you need to treat, how to find motivation. And like you need to treat how you can accommodate, your fitness lifestyle into your day and not around it. Like, or you have to build, all the other stuff around this and you have to like plan it in just like you would work. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try that because obviously, like I said, this is not working and I can't keep missing over this kind of, over things that, sometimes they are important, but I can't not make this also important. So I ended up going in the mornings. So I would wake up before I had to, before I needed to go to get ready for work and all that. So I was like literally waking up at like 3 in the morning and I would like quickly get changed and I would have like a little snack before, and then I would rush over to the gym and I would train like anywhere from 30 minutes to like 45 minutes. And usually I did a little bit of cardio and I did a little bit of like circuit training at that time and called it a day. And I came back home, got ready, and then I went to work. And it was a little bit tough, but I'm also a type of person that like I am a morning person. I do like waking up in the mornings, and I am the type of person like if I commit to something, I'm gonna commit to it. Like I don't care, like that's just how I am. And so, I knew that it was going to take a little bit of time to kind of adjust. But once I did, it was like, okay, like it wasn't my most favorite thing, but it is what it is. Like, I was like, okay, I'm slowly seeing results and I keep progressing little at a time. I'm building these habits. Like it's all going, even if it's not easy. And essentially, like, I just kind of continued that. And once I built into it more of a habit, I was able to switch back into the afternoons. And at that point, I started treating it kind of like I still do now. Years later, I'm still doing the same thing. It's like, no, that can wait. Or I'll purposely will have certain days where I'm like, okay, this is my day of rest day. And this is where I will get my errands done at this point. At like this can wait, and of course things come up and I don't have to be perfect, but for the most part, I try to. That's why like when I come home and like that's the first thing that I do is like I change, eat, and then like I go to the gym. I don't really sit down other than to eat because I just want to like make sure that I go. That's a priority for me. And, same thing is like, if people invite me to do things, I'm like, nope, sorry. Like we can do it another day if you want. On occasion, like I will get flexible with my stuff. But for the most part, like there's a lot of times you have to learn to say no to people and to things and to scheduling things in a way that's going to benefit you and your goals. So essentially, my first goal was just simply to like lose a lot of weight, to just get back to that like high school weight. And it took a while because it took a lot longer, to lose 30 to 40 pounds took almost probably like 8 months it took me. So it took a little bit longer than if somebody would have just been like, okay, let me get on this diet, and if they would have, known what to do, blah, blah, blah. But like, I was learning a lot of things along the way. I was making adjustments, I was building habits more than anything at that time. And so I finally like lost all the weight, and that was kind of like a mind fuck too, because I know for a while, like I tried getting on the scale often, and it was really like triggering and frustrating when, I would hit a stall and I didn't see the scale like dropping. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, I can't keep doing this to myself, and I have to just like step away from the scale and not get on and just wait it out and keep working, keep doing it, keep doing what I'm doing, keep progressing, and eventually it'll come off. And it did. Once I kind of stepped away for a couple of months, and then I kind of would go on and I'd be like, oh shit, like I lost some more weight. And I got to the point where finally like I did. And it was a mind fuck too, because it's like you develop a little bit of body dysmorphia at that point. So even though I wasn't like super overweight, but like it was enough to really mess with your mind. And it's like, I still was not like, I couldn't believe that like what I was seeing in the mirror was me. Like, I don't know. It was really trippy. And, my goal was just to, like I said, just mainly lose weight. And once I achieved that goal, was like, okay, I'm really proud and happy that I lost the weight, but my body is still not what I would like it to be. Like I felt like I was like just super like stringy and small. And at that time I was also starting to, being on social media, I was like seeing all these fitness like influencers, and I started to get into like bikini bodybuilding and having kind of like be in that like realm of awareness of like what that looked like and what that was. I started to get inspired to have like a next goal, right? To like build a little bit of like tone, and at that time, this is like 8 years ago. So like the bodies were a lot different, especially like when, girls that were competing in the bikini bodybuilding, they were a lot different to what they are now. And I remember coming across like Katie Hearn, Michelle Lewin, and I was like at all with their bodies. I remember like seeing like Courtney King, Ashley Kaltwasser, Stacey Alexander. And I was like, oh my God, like that toned body looks so good. I remember it's like, okay, so how do I get there? And I was like then starting to do research now on like, how do I build muscle? And, I like had no idea what other like set of challenges I was going to get into with, going towards that goal. I like basically by that time I had became really fearful of food, because I had this like negative mindset where it was like I related and associated food with the fact that like I was going to, gain weight, and like that was like the enemy. I struggled to eat. Like I wasn't like starving myself, but I definitely was under eating like all the macronutrients, and macronutrients are like your fat, your protein, and your carbs. As I was like kind of like researching things like that, and I started to see like, well, building muscle requires for you to eat, and for you to, like, especially back then it was like really big, like bulk. It was like, that's like was something that was just really popular. But I was still kind of like trying to figure out what that meant. I started to pick up, what I was like researching. And it was like there was like, if you think about it now, there's so much information that you have to filter. Like there is still a lot of information back then, but not the same as it is now. However, I feel like things were also very different. So I was like trying to filter out what kind of workouts I needed. And I mean, I just had no idea. But I started to pick up more, weights and doing stuff. But I was like, seriously, like the amount of volume that I was doing for like, especially like lower body, and the amount of accessory work that I was doing instead of like actually building, I was doing a lot of the incorrect exercises for a newbie. I was doing way too much, like just way too much in general. And then I was not eating enough. So I remember I was like so sore. I could literally barely walk for days. And now that I like know, I'm like, dude, I was like literally eating my muscle away. That's how like bad I was. Like my whole like nutrition was so off. And when I started to figure out like, okay, I need to eat more, but I was scared, and I had to like try to learn like, well, what does that mean? And I, started to come across like the macros, but like not in the same sense. It was like more like calories and all this other stuff. And I remember going onto like these calculators, and it would like do like a very basic generic macronutrient percentage. It was more so by percentage than it was by like actual grams. And I was trying to like play around with it, and I was so scared to eat, and I was like, oh my God, that seems like it's a lot. And it was a lot to try to learn about nutrition in that way, which I think is so helpful. Like I still really heavily think that tracking macros or calories and weighing your food for a short period of time is so helpful to anyone, because you really learn a lot about nutrition and portions. No matter what your goal is, like I think it's just like taking a little bit of time to do that is like it's a game changer. So I remember like, of course, like a lot of people say when they first get into this and they like become aware, and they're like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. And it really is. Like I struggle the same exact way. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take this a step at a time. And I first went in with, I was eating protein first, because at that time it was like I was not eating enough protein, and I had to like learn how to add in more protein into my diet and eat more and eat it in every meal. And you got to think of it like protein is like it's like what they said, it's the meat of the meal. And so like that's what you really want to make sure that you focus on, especially like for people who have diabetes. Like that's what the thing that they don't realize is that having plenty of protein in your diet is going to be really, really helpful, and making sure that you have protein in every single meal, because that's what gets your it makes your sugars not, it really like balances everything out within your meal. If you have a balanced meal, even if you can't have a lot of carbs, it's good to have a little bit of carbs, some fat, and some protein in most of your meals, because that's really gonna help with your sugar levels. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna focus on fat, and on protein, and I'm not gonna focus on the other two because I was really scared of carbs and fats. And I'm just gonna like focus on learning what foods contain protein and how much, and what does the portion can look like. And I'll just focus on that. Once I get comfortable with that, then I can move on to like another micronutrient, and that's how I just kind of moved on with it. And one step at a time. I'm like, I'm not going to overwhelm myself, because that's not going to do any good. That's just going to like make me so overwhelmed to the point that I get angry and then I give up, and it's like, I did get angry, and because it's like, you want it to be perfect and you want to hurry up and like get this going. But at the end of the day, it's like, you just got to like, go with the flow and just learn. And it takes time, It takes time to learn about all kinds of shit, and when it comes to fitness and nutrition, because I didn't have the best knowledge, even with all the information that was out there, I was just like so confused as to like how much I should be eating. And it took me a long time to figure it out. Once I got kind of comfortable with, having some awareness with what food contained fats, and how to like just food, how it is, and trying to eat a little bit of it and not get so scared. And I had to kind of do what they call, like, when people struggle with eating disorders, right? Essentially it was something that's kind of like what I had. When you work with like a therapist, they do a lot of exposure therapy. That's like a really, really good way to deal and basically, get through eating disorders, is by exposure therapy. And that was something that I didn't know that's what I was doing, but like essentially that's what I just was like, okay, I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to make myself a little uncomfortable, but not overly uncomfortable. Like there's a threshold and you don't have to cross it. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to, do a little bit, and get my body used to it at the same time, but also myself and my, and how the relationship that I have with it. And once I kind of had I felt like I had a decent foundation and base on calories and all of that, I questioned if I wanted to hire another coach. And at that time, like, I was also really becoming aware of like the online coaches. And, it was a little bit scary because it's like, you don't know if they have your best interest. And, there's a lot of horror stories, even to this day, or it's like people are just taking your money and they're giving you like cookie cutter, like, nutrition plans and stuff like that. And it is difficult, and that was something that I was scared about. So it took a while before I kind of made this decision, because I also am very prideful, where I want to learn how to do things on my own. I don't want to be spoon fed, and it's something about the hard work that I really appreciate and admire. And I was like, nope, I want to like try to learn as much as I can. But it came to a point where I was like, okay, I think I need a little bit of help, and I need to accept the fact that like there's people out there that know more than I do, and I need to accept the fact that like people can help me. I just have to be smart about where I get this help from. I have to think of it as a way to kind of boost where I currently am to where I kind of want to be in a shorter time frame, because knowing the way that I'm processing about learning everything is really cool, but like at the same time I'm wasting a little bit of time here, because I'm obviously learning things that I'm making mistakes on, which is great. You learn from mistakes, but at the same time, like, it doesn't hurt to also work with someone. So I started to do research and really kind of paying attention to the people that I kind of was like, okay, this is a potential, right? And I took notes of like the people that felt like I wanted to work with. And for me, there's a lot of like things that played around with it. So I really paid attention heavy to their content, what kind of content they put out, just kind of like their energy, and also like the people that, their other, essentially like the people that they also were helping, like, let me look into their stuff, because that way I can see what kind of progress their clients are also having, and things like that. Like you really start to you have to kind of like stalk someone for a little bit, And so that's what I did. And I came across like one of the girls I ended up choosing. She was actually a local coach. She lived nearby where I live, and but she was like an online coach, and I reached out to her and I worked with her for like 7 months. I had told her like my goal was to like build muscle. So she's like, yeah, we're going to have to, she got like a, base of like what I was eating, things like that. She was like, yeah, you're going to have to eat more than that. And we gradually worked our way into like a bulking phase and just eating. And I told her, I was like, I am really, really uncomfortable with, food, which is super common when it comes to fitness and females and competitors. And even though I was not into competing, but it was something that like once I became aware of the bikini bodybuilders, it was like I was hooked, and I knew that I wanted to compete one day, but like I knew that at the same time, seeing how closely I was paying attention to the sport and seeing that like, it required plenty of muscle. And at the time it was like way less muscle than what it is now, but it required muscle. It required a certain foundation before you even got to that point. And I'm like, I don't have that. And I don't want to step on a stage when I'm struggling to even eat, and then, it's just not really going to do anything for my mental health. And at the same time, I was like, I have, all this muscle that I have to build, and it just doesn't make sense to, because it's an expensive sport, and it just doesn't make sense for me to get on a stage and be told that like, yeah, like you just need to put on some more muscle. Like that was just a waste of dieting and money just to be told something that I already knew. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be thirsty about that. Like, I'm just going to work, And so I learned a lot, and I was so thankful that I finally made the decision to invest, on a coach. and that overall, like, my experience with her was pretty good. I ended up basically calling it quits with the coach just because I felt like towards the end, the last couple of months, she was just kind of like slipping. Like, it felt like I was really not important to her, and it kind of almost felt like it wasn't a cookie cutter by any means. Nothing was, but it just kind of began to feel like I was just mindlessly like checking in, and like she didn't even know who I was at that point, because I feel like she was maybe getting too many clients at once, and then you get sloppy with it. And I was not a fan. Like, I'm really big on quality service, and I started to feel like I wasn't getting that. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to cut it. But even from all of that, like, I didn't, think anything really negative about her. It's just that, stuff like that happens, like, it happens to the best people. So I didn't hold that against her, but it was just like, okay, I think it's just time. It's a sign that, like, I need to, call it a quits and keep it moving. But I learned so much. Like, I literally was like, wow, I'm so glad about this experience that I had. I continued to learn based off of what she had taught me, and which was a lot, and I struggled so much still, even though I was able to eat more and I put on some weight and I was able to build a little bit of muscle. I also had a lot of struggles with like no days off, and I was obsessed, and in a bad way. Like, I felt like, and this is also very common, where I felt like if I miss a day, that I'm missing gains and good. And it took a lot of like research from like valid sources to understand and validate the rest days are just as vital to progress and process as it is working out. And so I was so like inspired by, working with a coach and just seeing her process of navigating her business and all the progress that I have made and what I've learned, because I put in a lot of work. And I was like, oh my God, like I really want to do this. So this was like a couple years later. I ended up going, and I got through ISSA, I ended up getting my certification. At the time, like, I was like, debating a little bit, but then at the same time I was like, no, I want to do online, because I just felt like I based my experience about online, like in-person training to what I experienced, and I was like, that wasn't really helpful. Like, cool, like I learned a little bit and I got pushed and had a little bit of motivation at the gym, but essentially, like, I felt like it goes against my morals and values to take away somebody's money and to make someone believe and think that they're going to make progress by just coming into the gym, like I did, without really making any type of like habit changes. I'm like, and especially with their nutrition, I'm like, I'm just like thieving people at this point. And like, that's not what I want to do. Like, I really want people to learn and to make progress, So I was like, I want to do online coaching. So backtrack to a couple years after I had gotten my certification, and I was going through, I was like in a bulk for a while, and I got to the point where I was like, oh, like I want to see where I am with my physique, and I also want to challenge myself in a new way by like applying something different, going through a different aspect of phase, So I was like, I'm going to do a cut. And I wanted to do a cut similar to what like it would be to step on stage, to get like really lean. And I wanted to challenge myself with trying to learn like a whole nother, way, because I was like, that's a whole nother beast. And I would really like to see how I can do this. And everything that I've learned, how I can apply it and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, so 2017, I ended up doing, I kind of was thinking to myself, like, okay, I also want to see what it would feel like if I were to step on stage, like how would going on prep, like how would that feel before I just jump into it? Like, I want to know how that feels, how that changes my mindset. Like, I want to experience that first. And I ended up getting pretty lean over the course of, a couple months, a few months or whatever it was. I can't entirely remember, but I know it was over like 3-4 months that it took me to lose weight, because I was trying to do it in the healthy way. So you're not losing the muscle that you've built. You were just trying to slowly get, rid of some of the body fat. And I had, not a ton, but I had a decent amount to lose. I ended up losing my period during me being like the really leanest. Once I kind of got to I got to a point where I was like, okay, this is the leanest that I can get to. My body was not wanting to drop any more from there. I just kind of ended up staying in that phase for a little while, probably like another 2 months, I'd say, once I was at my lowest. And so I ended up losing my period probably almost 4 months, I'd say. And I remember going to the doctor and they were like, and I stopped taking birth control when I was like 20, I think it was. Yeah, I was 20 years old. So I haven't taken any birth control since 20. And I just to preface this, like, I'm just really careful. So it's not that I'm like infertile or anything like that. It's just, or not that I don't think so, but any kind of sexual relationships I've had, it's been just very careful, just because I make it clear to myself and to the person that, like, okay, I'm not trying to have kids at this time, so we need to make sure that we're careful here. So just wanted to add that. So I ended up going to the doctor, and they were like, well, my doctor was like, okay, let's just, which is something that I was doing research on. And they ended up telling me that, like, okay, we're going to put you on birth control. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not a very big believer in birth control. And it's not so much because of like the whole religious aspect that people sometimes are against it. It's more so on the hormonal, holistic aspect of it, if you will. So I was like, no, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to get my period back on my own. And sure enough, I did some research on like supplements, that are really helpful to balance your hormones. And I also tapered back a little bit on the training, started to go back onto a reverse diet. So I essentially was not going to stay in that lean phase anymore and just stay in a more healthier, but not bulking phase. And just kind of getting to a place where my body was like, okay, I feel good. This is like what maintenance should be, type of, and there was so much body dysmorphia that I experienced from, being kind of like thicker, and then, but not as thick as I obviously once was. And especially with having built some muscle at that point, my body had shifted so my body had, it shifted a lot, the way that it looked. And so and then I had lost so much weight. I was super lean. Like I was way leaner than I am now, like by far. I struggled big time with body dysmorphia, like insane, to the point that like there was days where I could not even concentrate. Like it was a very bad. It was like really, really bad. And at that time I had not started period. I had not started therapy at all. So I was really struggling big time. Like there was days where it consumed me so much. Like it was just like an unbearable type of consumption, that how much I struggled with body dysmorphia. And my relationship with food was still not healthy, because I struggled in so many ways with it. Like I wasn't as scared of it anymore, but there was an aspect of where I struggled, where I would have like the relationship between wanting to be completely perfect and having a perfect clean diet. And I can't think of the word right now. It's like at the tip of my tongue and I can't say it, but there's a name for it. So when people are super into like only eating healthy food, like I struggled with that for a while, and I had to again go through like exposure therapy, little at a time, kind of adding like little bits of like unhealthy foods into my diet, quote unquote unhealthy foods, in order to not have that mindset, because I realized that like, okay, this is not okay, and this is not normal. Like this is not even sustainable to an extent. because, it's like I wanted to enjoy like off meals, or what a lot of people call cheat meals. I don't like that word, but, so I struggled with that at one point too, because I was like, okay, I have to be perfect all week. And then I have one day where not even a full day, like it was just a meal where I would have like whatever I wanted. And because I had like at the back of my mind, I struggled with like, okay, I'm going to have to be perfect for a whole week, like all day, every day. And this is the only meal that I can like have just delicious, that like, and it's not like my food is nasty, but like obviously it's not the same as like pizza, and even if I made like healthy pizzas, like it's just not the same. And I would struggle with like overeating. I wouldn't say I ever binged. I didn't get to that point, but like I got close to it. Like I'm glad that I never really went too much into one end of the spectrum. Like I was close and I had kind of like that taste of it, but it was never to the point where it was extreme, which I'm really, really glad. And I think it's just a lot to do with just so much awareness that I've always had. And with myself that, I would question and be like, oh, wait a minute, like, what am I doing? And I didn't let it get too far, because there was something about getting too far in anything that really scared me. Struggled a lot with that, where it was like I was overeating, and I'm the type of person, like I love all food. Like I'm not picky at all. There's nothing that I'm like, ew, I don't like. Like I have always been that way. And I love sweets as well. Like I love salty food. I love sweets. I love everything. I'm always like, every week it's like, if it's up to me, like, let's go try something different. Let's eat different foods. Let's have dessert. Like, I really enjoy that. But at the same time, like I was struggling with overeating to the point that like you're left, especially when you're leaner, you can really see the difference with how much water you're holding. And, between like just holding from consuming so many carbs and so much, excess salt, sodium, and things like that, like it just, and sugars and whatnot, like it leaves your body feeling and looking different. And I would struggle with like having to take, having for that to kind of like come down on its own, because it does. There's a lot of that, like you don't actually, just by one meal, you're not going to gain weight. And that was something that I struggled with also, because I was like, oh my God, I just like gained weight, but it's not. Like most of it is just water weight. However, if you're obviously doing it on a regular basis, then yeah, it obviously converts into fat. But if you're just doing it like once a week, one meal, and even if you overeat, like it's just a matter of a couple of days getting back to your body kind of like ends up regulating itself, right? After, you drinking liquids, plenty of water, having your bowel movements, going pee, all of those things, like it ends up going back to normal. But it's still an experience to have to like wait 2 days or 3 days for your body to go back. And you're just like on this endless cycle of that. And it just becomes kind of exhausting. And I did that for a while. And just because I had this like, again, this continuous but shifted kind of like negative relationship with food, and having this like body dysmorphia, and having, like essentially like a eating disorder. The eating disorder is a little bit different than disordered eating. So I would say I had more of a disordered eating. However, tomato, like whatever, like obviously it's not the same. So there is differences, which I don't want to get into at this point, but maybe in a future episode where I kind of dig into more, statistics and more of like research information and whatever. But like in this case, like, I think I've basically kind of shifted into both depending on where I was at. So I would say that, after that, it was like I've struggled, with on a lot of different aspects. And, I definitely played around in it. I literally continued to play around with, my calories and how I went about eating, and trying a lot of exposure therapy on myself, depending on where I was at, where I was struggling with, and just continuously like trying to improve and learn more about, how to work my body the way that I wanted to, shape it and build the muscle. And it's a journey, and you're always like learning and changing, and you're always progressing, and there's just a lot of that, like the in-betweens from 2017 till just about a year ago. So about a year ago, I was like, okay, I feel like I've got a really, really good foundation on my body. I feel like I am really close to the point where I can get on stage and I could get like a good, I could potentially place decent, not like the best, but I felt like I could place decent on a stage and given feedback of where exactly I need to work, because I've built already a foundation on myself. I've already have like a whole, like it, fitness and eating. I love tracking calories and my macros till this day. My personality, I need that in order to, like, I don't need it. Like, I have plenty of experience with knowing what nutrition is and how to exchange and adapt to anything or where I am, and how to balance myself, my days, my meals. I've learned all of that now. And so I don't actually, like, I know portion control without even having to weigh it on a scale, but I just still love feeling and the consistency and just the way that I can keep somewhat of like control. And I don't feel bad for saying that. But I just love like the dedication and it puts my anxiousness, because I deal with anxiety. And so it helps put that to ease, at least in an aspect of my life, And so, but I also have a good balance with, like, I finally have gotten to a point, and honestly, like, I feel like kind of taking a couple steps back. So in 2021, back in June last year, I ended up hiring a coach. Now, for the last like 2 years or 3 years, I was like, I want to work with a coach, because I know from, just from following and learning so much, I knew that if I wanted to step on stage, I did not and could not do that on my own, because we become so subjective with our own bodies that we see that we don't really see what's going on. And it's a really easy, or hard to try to do this on your own. And so I had been looking up a coaches, kind of like the same method that I did when I first got the first one. And I, had been keeping an eye on a lot of coaches, like the top rated coaches that are like, converting girls into pros, and who have pros on their, on their team. And there's a lot about teams right now, and it's been like that for the last several years. And so I really was like, okay, these are the people that I really vibe with. I really love what they represent. I love what they like, their quality that they seem to put out, and this and that. So to me, like, all of that stuff that I pay attention to. And I reached out to a couple, as a matter of fact, and finally I ended up going with Team Elite Physique. I got like a whole year in advance coaching program, and I told him, I was like, so my goal is I want to step on stage at some point. And we worked really hard with my coach as part of the team, and she took a look at me from where I started and was like, okay, this is where I see. And she, because she knows about the professional league, they know exactly what it is that I needed, where I was lacking. So she's like, okay, this is where, this is where you're lacking. This is where we're going to work on. And we need to work on, in which this is something that I learned, that like, you need to work with a coach months even before you get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm going to prep, because there's likely like a lot of building that you're still going to have to do in a lot of cases, not everyone, but also it's like, your coach is getting to know you and your body, and it takes a little while to do that, and it takes a while to practice a lot of like different techniques, and it's just really, really good to kind of have that like foundation with your coach. And so we had been doing literally check-ins. I did check-ins with her every single week, and every single week, one day out of the week, I had to pop on a bikini, and, I eventually ended up getting one of the posing bikinis that they have in order, because I first started, I didn't have that, and I ended up getting a posing bikini that I would put on. every morning, because that was the only time that I had to be able to do my check-ins, and I had to take pictures and pose and take my weight, take my measurements, and I would send in like, what my week was. She would change my workouts every several weeks, and she gave me a meal plan. But at the same time, she would tell me like there was moments where she wanted me to stick to it for weeks on end. And there was times where I couldn't have cheat meals or off meals, just because it's like, if fluctuating a lot with your food, even if it's healthy, like it changes a lot your body and how it looks and how it, like I told her, like I'm the type of person, like I don't really like to be too much. I like to maintain myself pretty decent. I don't like to fluctuate too much because I'm not about trying to go on diets all the time. And even if I'm trying to build muscle, I do it from an aspect of eating enough where I can build, but not to the point where you get sloppy with it. And that's one of the huge things that I really liked about this coach, is like he doesn't believe in like sloppy bulking, and he believes in like structure, and that's what I like, and so that's why like a part of the reason why I chose that coach and that team was because of that. Like a lot of their same values is what is aligned with mine. It was like, especially when she would bump up my calories in order for me to kind of like, put on some muscle from where I had started. And we kind of went through like a little bit of phases where we kind of bumped up the calories just a little bit. And she wanted to see how my body was, moving along. And so when you're kind of playing around with like, doing stuff like that, like you don't want to have off meals. You want to stay as consistent as possible. So you're eating the same food every single day. You're eating the same amount of calories. And, it's really like, it's really crazy, but this is just the stuff that I'm pretty much used to. Normally, before I started working with my coach, I would, I still struggled a little bit with the relationship with the food, especially like on weekends where I would overeat kind of situation. And then I kind of still struggled with that. And normally I would create like a meal plan for myself. The calories, over time, I ended up getting really, really good. So I felt so good when I got with my coach, and she asked me like, so what are your calories look like? Where's your starting point? And I told her, and she was like, wow, your calories are actually like nearly perfect. Like she barely shifted them, like tweaked them just a little bit to what I had. And obviously they changed over time, from us kind of like, from me building muscle and able to maintain a certain body weight with more calories, and that was something that we kind of worked on, where like you can build your maintenance calories to eating more and not necessarily be in a bulk either. And so it was really nice to feel that, like, because I knew that at that point it was like, okay, when like I forgot to kind of mention was like when I got to the point of last year where I was like, okay, I've taken myself as far as I can with everything that I have learned. And I think I've done a pretty good job. But at this point, I know that if I want to go to the next level, even just to bring up my body to what I want it to look like, even if I don't compete, I need a little bit of assistance. And from having that experience of, working with somebody and knowing that like it's okay to have help, I felt really, really confident in knowing that like the best of the best professionals have a coach, so it doesn't say anything about who I am as a person and how much my knowledge means, because sometimes that's something that I struggled with too. It's like, oh, well, I made it mean that if I don't have a coach, then that validates more of my knowledge, stuff like that. So when I reached out, it was really interesting to see like the feedback that I got from her, and to see like I legit have gained. I felt like my body changed so much from the time that I had been working with her. And, my goals are very specific. Like, even if I don't, so I had let's backtrack and say, this is all like, I outlined a lot of my podcast topics, I do a little bit of an outline just because I don't want to deviate too much and get too much into ranting. But this one, I had done a little bit of an outline. However, I've already tried to record this like 3 times and I just could not. And I think that's another reason why I was resistant, is because I wanted it to be just super natural and authentic. Like, I just want to let it flow as it comes. And so that's why I'm kind of like, let's backtrack a little bit, because it's just coming out naturally, guys. We did a lot of changes, and I was literally up until the point to start a prep. I had chosen a date and everything for a show. However, I ran into some health complications, which I don't want to share in this episode, but I ended up deciding that I did not want to compete. And even though it's something that I truly admire and love, and I don't know that I necessarily want to compete ever. I don't want to say ever because, that's just not something that we should really put in our vocabulary, and I definitely don't want to. But it's the more that I keep growing as a person, the more it's just I love fitness, and it's so much a part of my lifestyle. It's really intense, but at the same time, I don't want it to make it who I am. When I think about competing, and I'm just there's really no reason for me to want to, I personally don't really have a need for it at all. I used to at some point, because I wanted, when I was, kind of in a different mental space, I wanted to prove things for the wrong or just not the most authentic reasons to myself, but it's for me personally, I don't really see a need for it. I don't really resonate. I really like the fact that I have built a body that I feel comfortable in, and it's not the leanest, but it's still pretty, it's a decent leanness that I can still feel very confident in. And I love the balance that, with my coach and stuff like that, that I was able to really create a better balance and relationship with my food, to where even to, I had created a pretty decent one, but I've improved it to the point where I'm dude, I have it set, I have it made, I am good. And it literally took me 9 years to get 8.5 years to get to this point, to where it's I just feel completely good, and I'm still progressing with my body. Because it is, especially the kind of body that I want, it's very specific, it's very aesthetic, goal oriented, and I have a vision, and I have always had a vision, and I've just never stopped. And of course, the vision has shifted a little bit over time, but at the end of the day, I kept progressing towards that vision. And even as it changed, I just kept going. And I'm eating plenty of food. I have a good relationship with food. And I have a really, really good balance with everything. And I'm just I don't want to fuck it up, at this point. I'm scared to an extent to potentially struggle again with a little bit of body dysmorphia. And, the days are far, far away from when I wake up one day and feel I don't really like how I look today. I feel a little bit extra thick. I have those moments. But usually it's just a small moment, and usually it's I don't even know, it's happens once in a blue moon. And I feel really, really good and happy about that. So one of the things I do want to mention is, it's there's so much information out there, but I think that it's okay to give stuff a try, because I know that it's natural. And even I played around with things, whether it was with foods or nutrition or different types of, like I said, different types of foods, different types of diets, workouts. I've done a lot of things in that realm too, where I really kind of played around with things and seeing how my body reacts to it, how I feel I resonate with it. But I think that people need to be more realistic with themselves and not get so hard on themselves, and not do things because you hear or see the success with other people, or because your friend Susie is doing it and she looks great. Your friend Susie is a whole different like organ, and she has a whole different type of body, and the way that her body functions and metabolizes food, her genetics, like all of that. So you cannot compare yourself to like anyone, and everyone is starting from different points. And that was something that I also struggled with. Like, I would compare myself so much to people, but I often did it in the wrong ways because I also compare myself to people who are way advanced. Like, there's no way I can compare myself to somebody who has 2 years of training compared to mine that I barely started, and that's what I was doing for a while. Or having compared myself to somebody who maybe also kind of started new and maybe only had a year or 6 months ahead of me, but she has some kind of a background with fitness. Like, that is going to make a huge difference because they're going to have some kind of like foundation with some kind of muscle. Yeah, I just really wanted to, just to say that, like, it takes time, guys, and it takes a lot of work, but, and the more precise that you want to get with your goals, like if you have a very specific aesthetic look that you're looking for, it is going to require a certain amount of sacrifices. It is going to require for you to maintain those sacrifices, and it is going to require a lot of things from you, a lot of your energy, your time, but it's worth it if that's what you want, and the same thing goes with taking time to learn these things. Like, I cannot, like, cookie cutter stuff, like cookie cutter plans, trying to go things in the short, quick fast way, like taking pills and diuretics and all this other shit. Like, it's not gonna help you in the long run. And doing diets because that's the new fad is not gonna work. Like, you have to change a lot of your habits, but they're not gonna be completely to a point where it's like you don't even recognize yourself. Like, unless like it completely does feel like you are maybe doing something completely wrong. Like, maybe you have been eating 2 meals a day, but then you end up switching. You end up finding that, like, wait a minute, like 5 meals a day just seems so much better, because that was something that I have also struggled with too and paid attention. Like, that's another thing. You want to make sure that you track stuff. Like, I cannot stress that enough. It's like, if you make any kind of changes within your program, within like your fitness routine, track that, write that down, keep that consistent for a couple weeks. Don't try to change too much at one time. Just change a couple things at most, track it, and see how you feel mentally, physically, see how you're progressing, those kinds of things, seeing how you're, it makes you feel as far as like sleeping wise. How are you, how is like your, your bowel movements, and how do you feel about it? Does it seem like it's something that you can maintain? Like, are you going too fast about something? Are you going too hard on something? Those are all things to take account on and think about. And, it's okay to play around with things, because that's the only way that you're going to learn, especially if you don't have the ability to hire a coach of some sort, which does help. But at the same time, you also have to be careful with who you hire, because there's a lot of people that are also very shady. So, that's something else that you really have to be smart about. But overall, like, it takes time. Like, people who think that like it's going to take, like, I've had so many comments in the gym, which I really appreciate when people come up to me and compliment me or ask me questions. I've had a lot of girls that are like, oh my God, like, one of the biggest compliments that I get all the time from girls is like my upper body, and how much they love the toneness of my body. And, luckily I don't get anything negative. Like, people are like, because there has been a lot of negative connotation with like women and building muscle and looking manly. And it's like, I feel like the women that look manly either have really, really, really good genetics, or B, they're taking steroids. So otherwise, like, you can lift a lot and you're not going to look manly at all. You're just going to build a look of toneness, and I love a good muscularity body, and, like, an athletic body. And, I've gotten a lot of compliments and like questions like, oh, so how long did it take you to get that body? And I'm like, 9 years. Because yes, I've built quite a bit of weight or of muscle, at like 4 or 5 years out. But at the same time, and I feel like I actually, because of so many like mistakes that I made, and then also taking the route of staying more so in like a maintenance, with my calories, staying more in maintenance and kind of recomping my body that way into building muscle versus doing kind of like bulking. And sometimes that kind of has its bulking, not in a dirty bulk, but just like bulking a little bit more than what I kind of get to, sometimes has its like benefits to quickly or like get to a building muscle a little bit faster. But I was like, I don't care if it takes me longer. I want to feel good about myself all year round. And I don't want to be in like this guilt tripping myself all the time for how I look. And at the same time, I don't really want to go through diets. And anytime I do want to cut back a little bit and look a little bit more, like cleaner and toned up and like just tapered back, like I don't have to do very much to get there, And so it takes a long time. And so for me personally, I was like, yeah, it's taking me 9 years or, whatever. And so expect this to be like a long journey, not a shortcut. And that's what I love about this sport, or just fitness in general, especially with the bodybuilding, because that's how I still work out. Even though I'm not competing, I want to look like a competitor on her off season. I don't care if I compete or not. Like, that's how I want to look. And that's the kind of lifestyle I want to have, as if I'm an athlete. I feel good to live that kind of lifestyle, but still have some balance whenever I want to. It just takes a long time, but you'll get there, and the more that you keep giving up, or the more that you end up doing too much too soon, or this and that, it's just going to make things worse. So I hope that this has been helpful and maybe inspiring. And this is probably like my longest podcast yet, because I had a lot to cover, but I really wanted to share that. So until next time, thanks guys.